Welcome to the Lisa Show and our creativity series. I'm really excited to introduce you to this next artist as we talk about ways that we can connect with others through art, as well as give us ideas for how to be more creative in our lives. Thank you for being here, James.
I'm really excited to be here.
Could you, for our audience's benefit, introduce yourself and your professional creative experience?
Yeah, I'm kind of all over the place. I refer to myself as an artist, researcher, and educator because I kind of overlap in all those different areas. And in each of them, really, they're domains of creativity. So that's what I do.
Yeah. And what I think is so interesting is that you have so many years of experience teaching art and teaching creativity, which I think sort of changes the way that you must look at it.
Oh, absolutely.
So I want to just dive in right away to this idea of creativity. How did you view it growing up? What was it like? How was it viewed in your home? And how is that translated to how you see it today?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. My mother was really good at creating an environment. And my father was a writer. We had a very non-traditional home. My mother had OCD, so it was a little bit, let's say, chaotic visually. But she was really great in encouraging us to explore various things. Every form of art. If we wanted to play drums, which I did for a little while, that's what I did. Always had us do survival camps as young kids, eating insects really crazy things. Yeah. But it was really not a normal kind of upbringing, especially for where I was raised, a very conservative community. And it was. I think I felt that I could do and explore anything, and it was okay to change your mind. And I think that's kind of where the creativity came. Is it was all right to make mistakes and to try avenues that might dead end.
Right.
And you can redirect into another area.
So what were some of the dead ends that you met? And then what were some of the doors that you walked through?
Oh, that's really interesting. I've always think I wanted to be an artist just because that's the way I process information and the way I engage in the world. It was just a natural extension. I used to get in trouble in elementary school. Dead ends were trying to do coursework and doodling on the side of the margins on that red lined, illegal paper and always getting reprimanded, even though I did my homework.
Really?
Yeah, in elementary school, that was not a cool thing. You were being messy. And what I was doing is processing information, and that's the way I've always done it, is visually. And so for me, that was a big plus as I started to progress. And my mother enrolled me in high school in a advanced art class, and I became aware that I found my tribe and my people, and that there was other people just like me. And so that was a big door opening. I think I was trying to, for a while, be very pragmatic, that maybe being an architect, but that did not last long.
Isn't that so funny? Like when you try to be a little bit pragmatic when you're trying to
just why
figure
be
things
pragmatic,
out. So the idea and the topic of creativity is so broad, and you and I have had the opportunity to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Before this, one thing that I am struck with your art in particular, and as an owner of a couple of your pieces,
which I'm excited about.
Which, yes, you've got to check it out, and we'll make a link to in our show notes for that. Is just how your ideas are so clearly communicated, yet you can see, like any good art, whether it's visual art, writing, anything, it can be interpreted in so many different ways. And it has just such a meaning behind that. And I'm wondering, I know we don't have a lot of time to fully answer this question, but your process from idea to creation, I think would be really interesting to get a little insight into your creative process.
Well, and I think it really aligns with the definition of creativity, right? Creativity is really a combination of being divergent in your thinking and keeping it wide open and exploring, and then curating the wide range of things to something that's more meaningful and useful. And so my creative process is like that. I brought my sketchbook, and in the sketchbook, I just kind of go all over. I don't even censor. If it's in my mind, I put it there. And then after, I'll go through and glean the best ideas from my sketchbook and make them a finished work of art. And I think that's how I'm able to stay authentic with my work and being genuine, is because I'm not in the sketchbook phase, that divergent range. I'm not really thinking about anyone looking at it. It's all for me. And if someone looks at it, it's fine. But ultimately I'm able to curate and select the best works that will be finished works. So that's kind of the way I do
I
things.
love that. And that idea of not worrying about the finished product at the beginning seems to be, an important key to that.
Hmm.
I'm wondering too if when you are coming up with ideas and you're just sort of playing around, if you do frame it like that in your mind, because once you make it your profession, do you see it as work? Do you see it as playing? How do you frame it in your innermost thoughts?
Well, it's kind of a combination because obviously creative constraints are necessary for any creative industry, profession, or anything. That you have time, you have timelines, you have material constraints, you have other things. But I try to play within those boundaries and push them, right? Make those limitations, find some liberation within there, and explore and be myself and be authentic. Because ultimately, if I'm not pleased with it, I don't think other people will be pleased with it. It will read as inauthentic and not real. And so, I those two, I kind of it's an interesting balancing act.
Yeah, I bet. Something that has struck me about you in particular is you're so vocal about connecting with other people and connecting and having art not live like the tortured, isolated
Hmm.
artist that only creates, for him or herself. But you really make an effort and do a great job of connecting with others, with your students, with other artists, with other collaborators. How did you come to that joy of connection?
For me, everything I do, whether it be an artist, researcher, or teacher, it's about connecting. And I mean, you and I met through a
Yeah.
connective kind of event, and I really think it's so important. Art really is about me connecting with ideas, right? Sharing that idea in a public space, and hopefully that idea connects or acts as a catalyst for someone to have some experience that's similar. And then sometimes we're fortunate, like now, to connect with the people and we have conversations. And so for me, I just love that. I think it's so rich. The idea of an artist being a tortured
Hmm.
person in isolation like Van Gogh, or yeah, I think it's just not very realistic.
Right.
Yeah, it's just not that palatable, right? Who
Right.
wants to be with that person?
Right. That's what
Yeah.
I think too. And when I think of the ways that I want to live my life and I want it to be full of art and
Yeah.
creativity, that is not independent of other people. And I
No.
have found the richest creative forces that I have felt throughout my life have always been with somebody else.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, as an artist, I try to be vulnerable and I'm pretty candid about what I've gone through and things that I'm struggling with, and I try to make that pretty visible in my work. But I think that helps connect with people that are going through similar things. Like I got a call just on Sunday, and we spoke for 2 hours with someone going through something similar
Wow.
that I have gone through with one of my children, and the art made it accessible for them to be able to reach out and talk, have that conversation. And it's a beautiful thing. It's one thing to go through something. It's another when you can lift someone else. You've gone,
Oh,
you're a Sherpa. You've hiked those hills. You've gone through there. You're a little familiar with the terrain, and that you can help other people to work through it and have support. You can stand with them, right? You can be with
yeah.
them. Yeah.
That's so interesting because I am on the other side of that, having been drawn to your art and the particular piece that I bought a couple Christmases ago for myself. It was really,
Hmm.
really meaningful. Has become a symbol for what I had gone through, which is something in my personal life
Hmm.
and what it means to my family. And when I look at it, I feel that like support and meaning. Like, yeah, that mattered, and we haven't gone through the same thing.
Yeah. No.
And I just think
Exactly.
that's what is so beautiful about the transcendence of creativity that can pull in a connection that you didn't even intend.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the reality is we're co-creators, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I make something, and if I hid it in my house and never showed it to anyone, then it's not really a creative process, right? It's not connecting,
Yeah.
and I think it has to. And the people that look at my work, they're part of that process, and they bring to it their own experience, and it's just as valid as anything I might be thinking while I make it.
Yeah. And I love that. And I feel like that there is such a spiritual quality to that.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you feel comfortable talking about it, I feel like that innately we're all creative beings because we're
Hmm.
spiritual. And I'm
Hmm.
wondering what your perspective is on your connection to God or to the spiritual
Yeah.
and your art and your creativity.
There's a lot, and I've had some chance to think about it a lot, especially where a lot of my work deals with that.
Yeah.
That I try. The phrase I keep on using is keeping the channel open. It's actually something I stole from a quote from Martha Graham, the mother of modern dance, and she talks in this quote about keeping the channel open, right? And it's not your job to question if it's good or bad. You just have to keep it open. And I think spiritually, I try to be open. We sometimes can be really driven by goals. I'm a very goal-oriented person, and I've learned that sometimes gets in the way of really having transcendent experiences, something that really is more spiritually meaningful and rich. And so I now just try to be open and then respond like I would with any work of art on the piece of paper, respond to the aesthetics there. But in my life, I try to be open to what happens and to be flexible. And that's sometimes hard for me. But I try to be, because when I do, great things happen. Like that phone call I told you about on Sunday, and just making time. It was a long day, but that person needed to have that conversation, and it was meaningful for us both.
And isn't that interesting too? Because that is not so easily identified as a creative process, but a conversation with somebody that transcends sort of time and space is a creative act. And
absolutely.
We change our definition of what we think is creative when we really give into that kind of flow.
Absolutely. I was able to hear Sir Ken Robinson, who one of the probably the most famous TED Talk ever, talking about creativity and education. But he, in the audience, before he started his talk, he said, raise your hand if you think you're creative. And there's maybe 10% of the room that did, and they were probably creatives like you and I. And then he started listing different things that he deemed as being creative ventures. And the room suddenly was filled with hands. And he said, we've got to stop thinking so narrowly about what is and is not creative. We have too narrow a definition.
Yeah.
And I really think that's true. I think when we have divergent openings, that we're keeping that channel open to whether it be spiritual things or aesthetic things or life experiences, then possibilities unfold, right?
Yeah.
And some really great artful moments happen.
Absolutely. I'm wondering what you have learned by teaching art to kids for decades. What have you learned about creativity?
So it's very interesting. Teaching in a very rigid or Western system of education has some very narrow definition of what is and is not worth knowing and how we know it. And it's really not conducive, really, for the most part, for education. So I completely threw that out. I really approached my classroom as a creative, like it's an extension of my studio. And what I try to do is pull out from them their own experience, emotional experiences, right? Because real meaningful moments happen when we throw out the external motivators, right? No one cares about grades. I mean, few people do, but not really. But the intrinsic motivators in people's lives, their emotional experience, their personal perspectives, that's what I try to do, is open up spaces that they could step into and be their own self and to find their own voice. And they happen to be working through an art medium, and then provide them the tools. Once they know what they want to say, then give them some skills to be able to say it. And so that's what I learned, is that sometimes we have to get out of the way and let people fill that space. And they usually have it within their head and their heart what they should be doing. And then we can help them and assist them in that journey.
Oh, I love that. That sort of guidance and that idea, instead of the step one, step two.
Yeah, I've never been a kind of a formulaic kind of, out of the box kind of way of teaching. I don't, especially for creative topics, it just doesn't make sense. And so I've really been benefited. My relationship with my students continue because it's a really rich experience when you help someone, again, that Sherpa idea. I've been on the aesthetic mountain. I kind of know the terrain, but let's help you find your own steps and moving forward and up that slope.
What a great way to approach it as a creative, and not thinking that, your process would be any different than theirs as well.
Yeah.
I wonder, as an artist, doing your own art in different mediums and using different techniques over the years, what you've learned about best practices. I have a lot of conversations with creatives of lots of different disciplines about how they sharpen the saw, how they practice, how they get better without becoming discouraged.
Wow. I have some weird things. I mean,
Yeah.
something that helps me is not thinking about making art in preparation to make art. So
Okay.
every morning I do a long mountain bike ride, and then I come back and I'm kind of refreshed. My mind has been not thinking about anything. And so that space is open again, that channel's open. So I can step in and be more intuitive and directed. Sometimes we think too much. I know that sounds bad, but I try to act intuitively, especially where I'm trying to connect with emotion and open up that spiritual conduit. I try to have that be open to suggestions and promptings. And so that's been helpful for me. And also the other thing is not being afraid of making mistakes again. Like I talked about, my mother was really good in getting us to explore different things. But I think sometimes we get really a little overly concerned about screwing up, making mistakes. But the reality is, you and I think both know that making mistakes is the only way we learn.
Yeah.
Trial and error.
It's unavoidable.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason there's a eraser on the end of most pencils, right?
Yeah, definitely. So when you're creating art, do you ever deal with imposter syndrome?
I actually feel that more after I make the art.
Really?
It's in museums and galleries. I kind of like, I'm looking around the room and seeing who's there, and I think, I'm just kind of a poser, like I'm LARPing, right? But most of my life I'm LARPing through it and just faking, and no one seems to be noticing, so I keep on going at it. But
Isn't that funny?
when I'm in the studio, I think I try to be myself and not worry about how I compare, whether it be with skill levels or content or whatever with other artists. So less and less so, but early on, I think it's very common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just talking to someone who has an entirely different artistic pursuit as you that basically said the same thing. And I find that absolutely fascinating that everyone has it to some degree and you just have to push it aside.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many great artists and great art has not been created because someone wasn't willing to put it aside.
And even more than that, I'm really broad in what I think people can do that are art, people that are drawing. Any way you can engage in your own creative enterprise is worthy, right? I mean, you're doing the best you can. You're trying to express experiences and gain skills to say things, and I think that's really good. And I see a lot of beginning people that are fumbling through different materials feel like it's just not worth it, but I think it is, right? What goes on
Yeah.
internally is as important as what happens on the paper. It's the journey that's the destination. It's what's inwardly happening that really gives more momentum to what you see eventually on the page.
Yeah. And I think everything that you do goes into that, comes in internally that might not even be related to creativity or your art, or you might not think so. And not ruling it out or filtering it before it's gotten inside is an important part of that. I love that you talk about mountain biking as a way of opening, something that you would think wasn't related as being integral to your process. Is there something that you're working on creatively now that might not have anything to do with visual art that maybe you're just trying at?
Oh, there's something, but it's kind of a secret project. So
Go on.
no,
You heard it here first. No? Come
no,
on.
I'm going to keep it tight-lipped.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
My wife says I'd have a way of jinxing myself. I get all excited and I tell people and they go, "Oh, that didn't happen."
Oh,
So, but I am because,
Good.
I really am expanding beyond my role as a teacher,
Yeah.
looking for ways to mentor and to advocate for the arts and arts education in different venues. So I'll just leave it kind of broad like
okay.
that.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
exciting. And a little bit mysterious, which is
Yeah,
also not bad.
I'm usually not very mysterious. I'm pretty transparent.
There was a time in my life where 5 little kids, not a lot of time, but just needed to put pencil to paper, right? Just needed to paint anything. And I found because I was so limited on time that I really didn't care about the output as much as I did, say, when I was a college student and I had a lot more time to devote to it. And I wonder, as I get older, if, like you were saying, those restraints that every artistic restraint can have a purpose to that we don't always have to see the things that we feel like are standing in our way as being necessarily a bad thing.
No, I think constraints are necessary, right? You have something to push up against, right? If you, I mean, it's like if I went into a classroom and I just had materials and I said, make something great. So usually, no, there's just you would generally not do anything. But if you have something something to be curious about, to push against, something about maybe what are your thoughts about being an American, or what are your thoughts about this? Something broad enough that they can bring their own voice to it, but at least somewhat more narrowed. And I think art needs that, right? You go to an exhibit, usually a museum, there's some organizing factor, whether it be the aesthetics or the time period or a theme. I love the themes. They drive and see how other people respond to a theme. That's a common theme in different ways. So I think constraints are necessary for creative things to happen.
When you want to be inspired, when you're feeling maybe blocked, or just like, I've just got to get this done, whether it's a time or a project constraint. What are some of your go-tos just to feel a little bit more like your true creative self?
I like to listen to audiobooks. And I do it all the time. And then another thing I've learned when I have, like, I just had a deadline for a magazine illustration, a couple of them, and I'll always do like 4. Because then I can pick one that, okay, this one's really the best. So those 2 things, I like to listen to audiobooks. Again, it's my mind thinking laterally, right? Yeah. It's divergent. It has nothing to do with it. And then always producing more than I need for a show or for something I'm going to give a client, saying, here are 2 of the best. I won't even show them the 4th.
Really?
I'll say, here are 2 that I think are good. Which one do you want? And so
I like that, being over prepared, and it can give you especially if you're rule prone or output prone.
I am. I'm pretty prolific.
Then it helps, though. That does help to kind of have those options. I like that a lot. This part of connection that we talked about a little bit earlier, I'm really interested in exploring, and I'm wondering if you would feel comfortable sharing some of the benefits of the connection that you found within either creating or connecting that have been most meaningful to you.
I will often wake up in the middle of the night working through a problem, and I will quietly, I'm an early riser, so sometimes it's 3 or 4 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
And I will go into the studio and quietly feel directed to kind of respond to something I was thinking about. And that helps me to connect to that idea, to visualize it, to kind of work it out. And then I also have found the conversations like we've had and I have with other people is a really good way to connect with my own thoughts is I see myself in the face of others and I kind of realize where I'm at with that connection.
Oh, I like that. That, really being present with someone else as a creative act. And finally, what is inspiring you right now?
I'm just so inspired by the wonderful people that I connect with. I really am really blessed to have a lot of connections. And part of that is because I have a drive, just a thirst to connect with different people with different perspectives and ways of looking at the world. And so they enrich my life, and I'm able to look at things in a way that I never would, right? That's what art does, is it gives a perspective that we can't really stand in those shoes and really see things as they see it. But when you have friends that are different than you and you may not even agree with, it really widens your perspective and helps you to grow. And so right now, that is, I'm finding to be a really rich blessing, is a diverse range of friends that push me to stretch.
Yeah, that's so great. And what a great output for creativity and just like living a creative life, which is a great pursuit and very a worthy one. So thank you for sharing your perspective on this. It's been such a pleasure having this conversation with you.
And it's great to see you again.
Thanks. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining the Creativity series on The Lisa Show. If you haven't seen our other episodes, go check those out. Leave us a review. Tell us what you think, and connect. Connect with James's art, connect with other artists, and make that connection as well.